Chapter 3, Mishnah 12. The Mishnah discusses whether a container filled with Maaser Sheni takes on Maaser Sheni's sanctity. Someone lends his containers for the storage of Maaser Sheni wine, and the containers are filled with wine. Even though he closed the containers after filling them, the Maaser Sheni does not acquire the containers. That is, the containers do not take on Maaser Sheni's sanctity. If, however, someone poured ordinary, i.e. untithed wine into the containers, and then designated the wine as Maaser Sheni, the status of the containers depends on the following. If he designated the wine as Maaser Sheni before he closed the containers, the Maaser Sheni does not acquire the containers, and they remain chulin. But if he designated the wine as Maaser Sheni after he closed the containers, the Maaser Sheni does acquire the containers. And they take on Maaser Sheni's sanctity along with the wine inside them. Once the containers are closed, the wine and its container are considered a single unit, with the container subordinate to the wine. Accordingly, when the wine becomes Maaser Sheni, the container takes on sanctity as well. The Mishnah turns onto other laws involving containers filled with concentrated liquids, where the status of the containers depend on whether they are open or closed. The first case involves jugs of terumah wine that became mixed up with jugs of ordinary wine. As a rule, if terumah becomes mixed up with chulin, the entire mixture must be treated as terumah unless there is 100 times more chulin than terumah. If there is 100 times more chulin than terumah, the terumah becomes nullified and the entire mixture is treated as chulin. The Mishnah discusses how this relates to the situation where a container of terumah wine became mixed up with containers of chulin wine. If containers of terumah wine became lost among chulin containers before he closed the containers, the terumah containers are nullified in a proportion of 100 to 1. That is, if there are 100 parts of chulin wine to 1 part of terumah wine, the terumah is nullified and all the containers are permitted to a non-kohen. But if the terumah containers were lost among the chulin containers after he closed them, the terumah containers prohibit the entire mixture even in the smallest amount. Even if one closed barrel of terumah wine is mixed up with 1,000 barrels of chulin wine, the entire mixture must be treated as terumah. This is because the closed container of wine is considered an important object, and an important object can never be nullified, no matter how much chulin it is mixed up with. In the next case, a person has several containers of tevel, untithed wine, and he wishes to separate truma from them. The rule is that when a person separates part of his produce as truma, that truma must be touching or near the produce for which it is designated. The Mishnah discusses how this applies to containers of wine. Before someone closes his containers of wine, he may separate truma from one container for all the others. If the containers are open, the wine inside them is considered near all the other wine in the room, and the truma can be taken from one barrel for all the rest. However, after he closes the containers, he must separate truma from each other separately. Once the barrels are closed, each barrel is considered its own unit, unconnected to any other barrels in the room, and thus terumah cannot be taken from one barrel for the other.